Hello. You've read so far two articles from our first module. The first one was about communication in general and the connection between communication and teaching, which is the classroom communication, and we are going to talk about it later. The second article from this module was about the main misconceptions in communication. With this lecture, I would like to make some points that were mentioned in the two articles more clear to you. When communication started to be studied in a more scientific way, which was about the 40 years of the last century, 1940s, it was considered as a linear principle, which means that the message starts at one point by the way the sender sends it, and it finishes at another point when the receivers receive it. And that was it. Nothing influenced it, there was nothing before that, there was nothing after that. It was only the message. Later, it was found out that the communication was a process, and this is mostly an influence of the researcher Berlo in the 1960s. What does a process mean? In process we have development. Something starts, something finishes, but there is always something that preceded the start and something that will go on after it finishes. It's a never-ending continuum. It's a process. It never stops absolutely. Even more, Barnland introduced the so-called transactional model in communication, according to which communicators respond to a number of internal and external cues. So communication can't be excluded from the influences from external world. Therefore, it is a complex process, and the individuals which are part of this process act on the meaning they construct, they send and they receive. This is very important since it means that both the sender of the message and the receiver negotiate to reach the meaning. Then we are coming to the notion of classroom communication, and as the very concept says, it consists of two different concepts, communication and teaching. We have come up with a definition of classroom communication, according to which classroom communication is the complexity of the teacher-student interaction during the teaching process, which happens both in the classroom and outside of it, including many other elements such as verbal and non-verbal behavior, body language, then many other factors that influence what is going on between teachers and students. For example, communication, classroom communication, is more than transferring knowledge from teachers to students. It's also conveying to students that teachers care about them, that they know that students are human beings with worries and commitments that happen outside the classroom as well. And that's why taking all that into consideration comprises the concept of classroom communication. Classroom communication is more than what is going on in the instructional process. Is how teachers and students interact in their everyday life, both in the classroom and outside of it. It's about how teachers address students, how they send mail to them, how they grade their homeworks, how they give feedback, how they tell them, they inform them about the results of what they have done. In order to be effective interpersonal communicators, teachers, as the most active actors in the communication process between what's going on between them and students, must have the following characteristics: assertiveness, responsiveness, and versatility. Assertiveness refers to the capacity that one individual has about making requests. It is about the quality that some people have to make others do what they want, as it says here, to actively disagree, to express positive or negative personal rights and feelings, to initiate and maintain conversations, and to stand up for themselves without attacking another. In this way, somebody must think that assertiveness is the same as aggressiveness. However, there is a big difference. Aggressiveness means making people do what one wants, making requests, but in an arrogant way. Assertiveness means you make other people do what you want, but it is done in a nice way. For example, if you are a manager, assertiveness means that you can ask your inferiors to do something for you, but you don't do it in a negative way. Then responsiveness refers to the capacity to be sensitive to others, to be a good listener, to make others feel comfortable in communicating, and to recognize the needs and desires of others. With a simple word, responsiveness means being ready and being always responsive to other people's requests and demands. Then versatility is the third characteristic of an effective interpersonal communicators, and it refers to both the capacity to be appropriately assertive and appropriately responsive depending on the situation. Versatile people know how to be assertive, how to be responsive, or in one word, they're flexible based on the situation. They behave and act based on the situations that require certain activity from them. Then another important thing is to know that teachers and students, as the main actors in the communication process, enter the communication with their expectations. All of us have certain expectations about some things, and those expectations influence our behavior. You had your expectations when you started these studies. You had expectations from the program. You had expectations from particular courses. You had expectations from particular teachers. But what is important is how to communicate these expectations through behaviors that can be seen. From the side of the teacher, in the context of ELT, since we are discussing classroom communication in the context of teaching English as a foreign or second language, there are 4 factors: the climate factor, the feedback factor, the input factor, and the output factor, or the student response. These factors are the factors that influence the behaviors, and they are related to the expectations. There are certain behaviors from all these 4 factors that communicate negative expectations, and we as teachers should avoid such behaviors. You have them all listed in the articles that were put online. And for example, under the climate factor, you have different things that are related to the classroom atmosphere that you create for students. In the feedback factor, there are different behaviors that are related to the way you give feedback to students. For example, you can praise, or in everyday situations, you praise some students more, while some students you don't praise at all, or you just communicate negative things to students. You criticize them when they are not successful, but you don't praise them enough when they are successful. Please refer to these communications as they are listed in your article and try to avoid them because, as we said, they communicate negative expectations to your students. When negative expectations are communicated, students' affective filter is raised, it's very high, and there is no learning. If we want learning to happen, the affective filter, the imaginary filter in our brains that is related to the way we feel, should be low if we want the learning to happen. From the input factor, the negative expectations that and behaviors that we should avoid are based on what and how we transfer knowledge to our students. They refer to clarity, how much information we give. They refer to summarizing. They refer to giving more information than students can acquire for that particular unit, and so on. And from the output factor, there are things that are related to student response, how we relate when they give their response. From the factors that are involved in teacher-student communication, we should mention a few ones. Appearance, physical and psychological condition. Unfortunately, appearance does matter because our first impression is very important for how students will perceive us in general. Then our physical and psychological condition, if we are in a good mood, if we are in a bad mood, because students reflect our feelings. If we feel bad and nervous and bored, they will copy our mood and they will feel the same. Also, social traits are important, whether the teacher is outgoing, whether the teacher is assertive, whether the teacher is empathic. Empathic means if we as teachers are able to see how other people feel and react based on that. If we can empathize with their feelings, if we know how they feel in certain situations and we understand those feelings. Then as teachers we should have some talents. We should all be artistic or musical or athletic maybe, because research has shown that students like teachers that are artistic. From the different teaching styles, dramatic style was reported to be the most successful among students. And eventually, our intellectual capacity, whether we are logical, whether we are reflective, which means whether we examine our behavior on a daily basis. What have we done? Was it good? Was it bad? Should we change? Did we present a successful lecture to students? Did we organize a good class? And many other things. And how studious we are. Do we prepare enough for our classes? Do we base what we teach on facts, on arguments, on best practices in that field? From the factors that are important for teacher-student communication, we can also mention the moods and feelings. Especially humor is it is a magical thing that can be used in classroom.